Okay, well, thank you for being here. So I'll go ahead and get started. As you know, I'm Dr. Joanna Stegall. Thanks for downloading those power phrases for parents and their IEP meetings. A little bit about me. I wear a few hats. I'm a retired professor from a university where I was in leadership and education and in special education, particularly, and worked with undergrad and graduate students in special education and in general education. I've been in education before. I hate to think of it, it's already been over 3 decades. And I got my PhD in special education. Um, I already was a teacher, but then after my daughter was diagnosed with a disability, and I recognized that I was a gen ed teacher and I'd known nothing about what was going on, I was given this remarkable opportunity to earn my PhD at Clemson University through a grant. And so then that led me down this road. Since I've retired, I really, really have a heart for parents, and I've read thousands of IEPs. So I'm very aware of how poorly some IEPs are written. And often I see the students not making good progress as far as their goals go. So that's just a big part of my heart, having been there and kind of done that, is seeing how I can help others do the same. Okay, so let's go. So just to give you an overview, what I'm planning to do is talk about common challenges that parents face with the IEP meetings. Then I will talk about the power phrases, so practical things that you can do in really tough and stressful situations. And because you have the legal backing behind it, hopefully this is going to make you feel really comfortable. Then we'll also discuss how to follow up after a meeting, things like note taking, prior written notice, how you can stay calm through the process because it is very emotional. And then we'll wrap up with a call to action. So let's do it. Okay, so IEP meeting difficulties. Frequently, you have the list from your download, but you can feel outnumbered. All right, so power will come from your preparation. You need to think about practicing everything you're going to say. And also, if you start feeling outnumbered or overwhelmed, you can prepare for that. And I'm going to give you things that you can do that will help with that. And I don't know, perhaps you request a certain service or accommodation, and the team says, no, we don't think that's necessary, or no, we can't do that, or no, we don't have the money for that. We're going to talk about what to do when that happens. And then also, sometimes you might feel ignored or rushed. So you feel like your concerns aren't truly being heard. Well, you are the most important person on the IEP team, right? You know your child better than anyone else. So you need to be heard. So I'm going to give you what to say and how to handle that. Okay, so I'm sure this, at least one of these four might sound familiar to you. Um, these are very common challenges. I've seen them time and time again, and there are ways to address them and be heard. So, first of all, let's set you up for success. Here are a few things you can do. You'll need to practice before you go in. All right, it's like a muscle, right? We have to use it to keep it strong. So, really practice, especially those key things that you know may come up in the IEP meeting that you want to be sure that you are prepared for. If there are questions you have or situations that have occurred in the past or things you've seen in the IEP, go ahead and think through how you want to address those items during the meeting. You want to be sure you pause after you address them because you want to give them time to think and you want to stay in control. So if you ask a question, but then you start talking, you're giving them the control. If you ask a question and you stop talking, then they're accountable to you, right? to give you an answer. So consider that. I know it's hard. Sometimes I've even caught myself putting my hand over my mouth because I'll be wanting to talk and I know I don't need to. And so the more you practice that, the better you'll get at it. You want to document everything. So you want to take some notes. You want to be sure that everything that you do is documented. We'll talk more about that. And then stay composed and firm. It's so easy because emotions can get so high when we're talking about our children, especially if we're frustrated about some things that are going on at school. So I'm going to talk to you about strategies that can help with that because I certainly understand that I've been there and experienced that. All right. So let's get into the power phrases. And you'll notice on your power phrase cheat sheet that you downloaded, I also correlated that to the specific parts of the IDEA law, that over 500 page document. So you don't have to, but you'll want to use those if you end up having to write a letter or anything. You want to be sure you do use the part of the law that you're referring to. It just makes you look credible and they're going to understand that you know what you're talking about. So, all right, power phrase one. What do you do when a service is stopped or reduced? Well, you can say something like, show me the data to justify your decision. So they can't just stop the service without having a good rationale for why. And don't let them stop a service just because your child has met their goal, unless your child is on grade level. So if, for example, I say this example all the time, you have a child who's in the fifth grade reading at the second, third grade level, let's say third grade. And then he meets his third grade goal in reading by the middle of the year. So they're saying, oh, good, we can stop providing him that additional reading support. Well, no, he's still a whole grade level below his peers. So what needs to happen is there needs to be a new goal established at the fourth grade. And you keep pushing them to do that and work with your child as hard as they did the first semester, trying to get, because the goal is to get your child as close to non-disabled peers as possible. So they need to be growing regardless of what their disability is, right? There needs to be change in the positive direction. Okay, that's overarching that all 13 disability categories. This is true. So recently, June of this year, very recent, there was a new court ruling, and that said that you cannot have insufficient data. That means that they must show you information that will justify what they're doing. It can't be because we don't have money for it, or it can't be because we don't have enough special ed teachers or parapros, or that is not acceptable. But I hear it being used often. So if you tell them that you need to pause because the data isn't sufficient or it's not available and you need it, then you can ask for a prior written notice. So if they're denying it, so like let's say I'll expect you to get this data to me within the next 10 days and we can reconvene. And if that doesn't happen, or they tell you they don't have time to do that, then you can either send an email or you can say it, you can say it to them, but you definitely want it in writing. So you want to follow up with an email and just tell them that they are denying your request. So they need to provide prior written notice outlining the reasons and the data to support that decision. And it needs to be good data. So you should have a baseline from where you started at the beginning of the school year. We call that the baseline, the starting point. And then there should be a goal for where your child was supposed to improve by the end of the year based on an ambitious yet attainable goal. And then where is your child in relation to that goal? And there should be progress being made. If there's not, then they should be intensifying the services provided to your child to make sure that your child is going to grow in those areas that the team decided were important for your child. Okay. I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you. Power phrase two. You know, teachers are the worst about talking over people. I guess because so often we end up talking over students. We just do it and it's rude. I know. So, what you need to do is let them know by saying something like, I need to finish my thoughts, so my concerns are part of the official record. Um, you want to believe that this was not intentional, so they're going to stop, right? Hopefully that's the case. But if they don't or don't really pay attention to you and what you want to say, then you can say, well, we can pause and come back to this, but I will not move forward until I'm heard. So, in other words, you're not going to sign the IEP or agree to it until you've been heard. And if this is a issue, an ongoing issue, you're going to want to take notes on who's interrupting you and what they're saying, when are they saying it, and if you are indeed ever given an opportunity to share the things that you want to say, because you, again, are the most important person on the team. Okay, sometimes they'll just deny service. You know, sometimes even though your child is way behind his or her non-disabled peers because of reasons. They can have all kinds of different reasons. But if they cannot show you data and legal basis that they use to decide whether or not your child needs the service, then that's illegal. That violates IDEA. So you could say, if that information is available now, I'll wait for you to gather it, or we can reconvene in 10 days once that information is collected. But you do not want to just let them deny service. I read the other day on Facebook, one of the parent groups, and a mom was saying that the school district just told her that there's a service. They just don't have that service in their district at all. That's not what the law says. The law says that if a child needs this service, as a part of IDEA, this service should be provided. Now, they may not give you the service exactly like you think you want it, but it should at least be causing your child to benefit from his time at school, to make some positive changes. Okay. All right. And this is happening all the time. Budget or policy is used as an excuse. So sometimes the pushback isn't no data. It's more like we'd love to, but we don't have the budget for that. Or we just don't offer that service at this school. Have any of you heard those lines? It's very frustrating, right? It can be infuriating because your child's needs shouldn't be dismissed due to money or red tape. So budget limits can reduce your child's right to free and appropriate public education, which we refer to as FAPE. It's part of that jargon that we use, right? So you will need to speak to them about that. And if you say, and they're not, they're refusing to do it, you need to remember that IDEA gives you this. It's not a favor. It's the law, and it's what they're needing to do. So they, may say, nope. Well, then you can say, hey, I understand budgets are real, but my child's IEP must be based on my child's needs, not the school's funds. Services for my child are not a favor, it's the law. So if they talk about, well, they just don't have the money, if funding is an issue, please list the alternative or alternate resources you provide to ensure FAPE within that legal mandate. So, maybe they said, well, they can't give you the one-on-one parapro. Well, what can they do? What are they going to do for you to make sure that your child, whatever it is that the parapro is supposed to benefit, that your child still benefits? They can't just say no. So they can also say things like, you could say things like, budget limits can reduce FAPE. So how will you meet my child's needs with that legal mandate, like we talked about in the slide before? But if the budget excuses keep coming up, you're going to want to send an email. And again, it can be polite, you're in control and firm, but that you are not letting this just be buried. I appreciate today's discussion. I understand the district has budget constraints, but as we discussed, your child, right to FAPE means we need to find a way to provide this service. If you have IEP goals around this, the need for this service, then certainly they have to be provided. And then you said, I'm looking forward to hearing how we will do that. And you're going to want to give them a reasonable time limit. I look forward to hearing from you within the next 10 days. 10 days is a reasonable amount of time. You make those business days for them to get back with you. If you don't hear from them, then it's time to escalate because they're going to try to not um, make any changes and they're being disrespectful. Power phrase five. Yep, they start using all that jargon. It just starts flying all over the place. And that can cause us to struggle and that can cause people to feel uncomfortable. So if they say something like, according to the latest BASC 3, or the composite T-score is 63, indicating clinical significance for externalizing behaviors, they're supposed to put that in language you can understand. So don't be afraid to say, hey, I don't know what you're talking about. All right, so let's make sure that they are telling you what it means. And you can, just say, before we move on, could you restate that in plain language so that I know exactly what it means? It's fine to say that. And they're supposed to do that. They're supposed to provide it to you in ways that people that are not familiar with the educational world can understand it. So don't feel intimidated. They're in the wrong by doing that. And you would want them to include it in plain language in their notes so that when you go back to read through the things that we're talking about in the IEP, you actually understand, again, what they were talking about. Also, be sure that all areas, all goals in the IEP are addressed, or all the weaknesses that are written or things that your child needs to improve upon are addressed. Sometimes they'll make comments about behavior in the IEP, but they won't have any behavioral goals or they won't offer to provide a functional behavioral assessment or behavior intervention plan. That's one example that I see frequently occurring. For any area of weakness, there should be IEP goals and special ed services to go along with those to be sure the child makes gains. So, power phrase six. Sometimes their data can look fuzzy. Fuzzy could be because they haven't been taking collections of data very frequently. It could be that you're not really seeing that exact goal in the data. Maybe they're using, MAP scores. That's very common around here. Well, actually, a MAP score is a composite of lots and lots of different areas in math or reading or whatever it is. So, how would you know that that particular goal is improving? And MAP scores are only taken, in let me see, the fall, the winter, and the spring. Well, that's not really progress monitoring. You don't want to wait an entire semester to see if your child's making progress. You want it much, much more frequently than that. So you want quantifiable, not qualitative. Um, so it should not be subjective observations. They shouldn't say, open-ended things like, well, he just really struggles with writing, or well, he just can't stay in his seat, or can't find his homework, or any of those things. That needs to be quantifiable. What do you mean by that? 4 out of 5 times when I ask him to pull out his assignment, he's not able to locate it. That's quantifiable. Okay. And I can talk more in detail about that in the future classes if you're interested. So, what I would do, they have to, according to law, give you progress on your child's IEP goals at least once every 9 weeks. But that's a whole fourth of a school year. I would want the IEP to know how my child is doing the IEP goal much more frequently than that. So I would make that every 3 weeks. And that is something that I'd have written into the notes of the IEP. And if they refuse it, then they need to tell you that in a prior written notice that they're not doing it. Because then if your child doesn't do well on his goals, you'll be able to say, hey, I asked for more frequent data, and why didn't you increase the service when he wasn't making the gains that he's supposed to make? Okay, so that's six. And you can also, they give you a fuzzy answer back. I'm sorry, but I really need to know the specific method. For example, will it be a weekly reading probe, a monthly behavior chart? Let's get into that goal, okay? So when IEP goals are vague or not SMART, SMART means specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound, then they're not written effectively. And I've seen most IEP goals are not written in that form, but that is what they're supposed to do. So you could say to them, let's rewrite this goal so that it's smart. So, for example, let's say that the accuracy in computation is currently at 70%, I see. Well, let's say that it's going to be 90% by May. And then let's talk about how that's going to happen. What services will my child receive to be sure they get the assistance so that they do make that gain? All right, power phrase seven. Sometimes goals are vague or unmeasurable. And back to what we were talking about, Barb, they often do this with these areas of executive function, which you use self-regulation strategies to help students who struggle with executive function, which is very typical of students with ADHD. And students who have learning disabilities also typically have ADHD as a part of that. So that's why the law has the functional performance as a part in there too. So anyway, if those goals are vague or unmeasurable, then you need to write it so that it's smart, like we've talked about, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. You want those goals to be ambitious yet achievable. And there are ways you can go about doing that that's beyond this presentation, but we could talk about in later ones if interested. So you might say, for example, increase reading fluency from 60 words per minute to 90 words per minute by May 15th. Could we model it like that? Whatever the goal is that y'all are working on. And then you want to be sure that you're receiving information because that allows for what I'm calling live editing. That would be making changes throughout the year. It's not like they can, you start in the fall and they have to do the very same thing all year long. That is not what special ed is. They should be making changes according to how your student is doing. All right. If what they're currently doing, your student is making the gains that you've all decided the child needs to make, then maybe keep it the same. But often you'll need to have that service intensified because the child won't be progressing at the pace that you agreed at the meeting. And don't let them make it too easy because teachers love to make super easy IEP goals because then they know they're going to reach them, right? It'd be really easy to reach them. Your child, according to IDEA, should be given achievable and ambitious or attainable and ambitious goals and receive the supports to meet those goals. Power phrase eight, you show up at the meeting or an hour before the meeting, you give the draft of the IEP. Well, first thing I would say that's a red flag because that means they're just putting it together and it made me feel like they're doing it last minute. So I'd be really wary of that. But don't feel like you have to go into that IEP meeting and sign anything if you've not had a chance to read through it because you won't know the questions to ask. right? So you could say, I need 48 hours to review this draft thoroughly. Let's reconvene within 10 days to finalize it. Even if you decide you are going to go ahead and go to the meeting, even though you just got the draft, really, until you have a chance to read through it, they can't force you to sign anything. And because they were so late in giving you the draft, that's just reasonable that they would give you time to read through it and then reconvene to make sure you don't have any other questions. So you're supposed to have meaningful participation, and meaningful participation means that they're going to listen to you and that they're going to consider the things you have to say and the questions that you ask. Don't make them, they want to go on to the next thing, right? They've got a ton of IEP meetings they've got to get through at the end of the year, the beginning, teaching's tough. And I know I did public school teaching for 25 years. I understand it. But your child's too important for them to rush through it. And also, you're too important a member of the IEP team to be forced to sign the IEP on the spot. So you could say, I want to contribute meaningfully to my child's IEP. And to do that, I must read it carefully and on my own time. So they should not argue with that. Um, and, they'll even, like I said, wait till you're there. And you just do the same thing, okay? If they're waiting until you're there at the meeting and expecting you to be fine with just, letting them tell you about the IEP and then you signing it, I would not do that because that's when parents end up getting really frustrated and upset because they assume something might be in there or there was something in there that they didn't know was going to be in there. So you could say, well, please email me an editable copy today so I can insert my comments so that I can let you know. And then that's really good because then when you meet with them, they'll have had a chance, hopefully, to read your comments. And it will help to expedite the meeting because I know that can be an issue too. So if they send it to you, I would try to get it turned around within 24 hours with your comments, just because that shows them you mean business. Power phrase number 9. When the school ignores your IEE or your independent evaluation, then you need to tell them, please add my independent evaluation to the record and explain in writing why its recommendations aren't being adopted. Also, they cannot refuse to consider the data from an independent evaluation. So don't let them say, oh, we already have our data or we already have the results from our school psychologist or whatever. That's fine, but they have to consider this other evaluation and they cannot refuse to provide you with a second evaluation if you have a good rationale for needing to do that. Okay, if not, and they, don't do it, you can say, well, if we still disagree, I'm prepared to request mediation. Let's try to align first. So mediation is when you pull together someone outside of the school, typically from the Department of Ed, that will assign someone that will come and sit down with all the partners and try to figure out a way to move forward without having to get into further procedural safeguards. So, and I gave you the part of the IDA law there that says the team must consider any independent education evaluation. It's just flat out. It doesn't say, they want to, or if they have time, they must. And 10, when the meeting is rushed or the bell is about to ring, again, there are some things you could have them to do prior to the meeting that might help with that. Teachers have to get back to their students. Yeah, that's reasonable. Or the bell rings and they've got to go to bus duty or whatever. But that doesn't mean that you have to feel rushed. That is not your issue, right? You're there for your child. And you can say something like, my concerns aren't fully addressed. I'm requesting we reconvene within 10 school days to complete this discussion. And IDA says it should be within a reasonable amount of time. It doesn't say exactly how long, but it says a reasonable, and 10 days is certainly reasonable. And you can say, please record today's minutes that we ended before covering these items. And I want these discussed at our next meeting. So you can request an IEP meeting at any time. A lot of time parents think that they only can have the one at the beginning of the year and the end of the year, and that's just not true. You can have one at any time that you're not feeling good about how things are going. And it should be within a reasonable period too. And typically, the states make this decision, but typically it's within 30 days. So you do have to give them some time to get it scheduled, but they can't just keep putting you off. Power phrase 11, when the team says no, but won't put it in writing. You've asked them to record it, but they were not doing it. And you just say, since the team is denying my request, please provide prior written notice outlining the reasons and data supporting that decision. Okay, so, and then if they don't give you the prior written notice, you've got to go ahead and start mediation and use your due process, because that's really illegal. And you can say, I'll wait here while you draft, if you're at the meeting, while you draft the prior written notice, if you'd like, if you have time to do that, or you can say, you know what, I'll expect that within 48 hours. That's reasonable, because if they wait much longer than that, they're going to forget, right? And then you may need to escalate, like I said, you may need to go to the SPED director, if they don't have the prior written notice, so that she or he can make sure it gets done. But if the special ed director is not on top of things or not very easy to deal with, then you may have to go to mediation and use due process. After the meeting, what can you do? Well, you want a copy of the IEP meeting notes and the IEP itself, whether it's still in its draft form or if you're satisfied with it and you sign it, you have the right to have that. I would write a follow-up email, especially about any changes that you're talking about. And if they're refusing some services, remind them that they're supposed to give you prior written notice and that you're expecting that. Be sure you're clear on how you communicate with them and how you're going to receive information about your child's progress. So, this is very important that you follow up after you might be like, whew, thank goodness I'm done with this IEP meeting. Well, I know, I wish. But they need to know that you're still around and that you're gonna hold them accountable. Excuse me. All right. Stay calm. Sorry. You're talking a lot today. Stay calm and take care of yourself. Then get support from others, other parent advocates. Parents are the best for their children to advocate for their children. Some people may not want to do that, but even if you don't want to advocate for them, you need to know what's going on so you know your advocate's doing a good job and your child's getting the best services. Okay, so that was a quick rundown. I'm hoping I gave you some additional explanation for those 11 power phrases. What I did is I just took any IDEA law and what I've observed as areas that seem to be deficient in a lot of IEPs I read and put those together and gave you some background information and some wording to use to go along with those and where it is in the law. So remember, you can disagree with them because they're dishonoring your child and IDA when they're not providing what they're supposed to. You still deserve to be respected. When the team sees that you're prepared and that you know the law, then they're much, much more likely to take you seriously. You're not being an overbearing parent. You're not being a helicopter parent. You're asking them to do what IDA promises, the federal law promises. And you can ask yourself and you can ask the team, is this decision truly in the best interest of my child? And a big and, is it supported by data? Because if it's not supported by data, that decision should not be being made, right? Regardless, something needs to happen there. So I want to let y'all know, in case you're interested, if those things that I talked about today really piqued your curiosity and you would like to continue to have some guidance and learn more about IDA and special ed and services, I'm going to start, because I have a lot of parents that are asking for this, an IEP advocacy 6-week series. I'm calling it a confidence catalyst, to give parents the words they need to use, the situations. There's much, much more we could expand on than I did today. So I wanted to share that with you. So it's going to have 6 weekly self-paced training modules, and they're going to be pre-recorded so you can fit them into your week as you have time. They're probably 30 to 45 minutes, kind of like today. And then this is the 6-week series outline, which if I was doing this at a regular value, I would value this around 497. So it would start with IEP foundations and how to reset your mind to understand your significance, and to put you in charge to help you set your own advocacy goals. Hopefully that will save you money on paying an advocate if you find that that's necessary. And then how do we leverage IDEA? What what do we do? Some of the things that I've mentioned, we'll go into greater detail about those. Um, and then what, how can you tell if the data is really good or not? How can you tell if they're setting ambitious goals? All right, then we'll do that week 3. And then we'll do some role playing on the things that the people taking the course want us to do. We'll pick the phrases and we'll make them more personalized. I'll teach you in week 5 how to create a progress monitoring track sheet that you can use according to the information the school's providing, so that you can see if your child's making good progress, and we could even investigate and figure out what would be an appropriate amount of getting into progress for your child, depending on what the goals are. And then at the end, we're going to draft a 90-day advocacy roadmap to get you started in the fall where you're ready and you have a good plan in place. And we'll celebrate. We'll celebrate that you are going into this year's IEP season, hopefully feeling much more prepared. So, and then, of course, I have some additional things. I've talked a lot about things that you need when you're talking with parents and when you're uh, documenting services. So I've created a bunch of those. And also, I want to let you know that I am going to provide live weekly Q&A coaching calls. So in addition to listening to the video, I'll have times in which we can get online and we can really personalize what I'm teaching about to your child. That's when you'd want to have a copy of their IEP, and we could look very specifically at things, and I would give you, it's like free advocacy work. But I'll be happy to do that. So that's going to be part of it. So I said I got bonuses. There's going to be an IEP letter and document letter file. This gives you a bunch of letters, email templates, and things for those situations that come up. Samples of escalation letters and disputes, how to say the right things under pressure, just things that will help save you time and hopefully encourage you when those things come up that you need to handle. Also, I'm going to give you an IEP bank and accommodation guide to make sure that the types of accommodations and the types of goals that are being set are truly what your child needs to have. And I'm going to give you some examples by the category so you can see what good ones would look like. And it'll give you a lot of things to consider. And let me tell you an example for this. I'll see that a child is, let's see, I'll say math. I'll say, okay, a child doesn't know his basic facts, maybe her basic facts, multiplication and division, and she's going into sixth grade. And she has dyscalculia, so she has a math disability. Well, studies have shown if you don't know your basic facts, you're not going to be able to do higher level math because you have to understand the rationale behind it. We can use calculus. Anyway, there's a whole big study, a ton of work in that area. So they come to you and they say, well, that they're going to use her MAP scores, or maybe they say they're going to use the cumulative test after each chapter, and make sure she's making an 80% or above. Or that's too general. That's too general. Her specific need is computation and multiplication and division. So what are they going to do to measure that specific goal to figure out if she's making gains there? So sometimes, or, child will have a reading disability, and they'll talk about one area of reading. There are 5 important areas of reading. It's not just reading comprehension. Reading comprehension is what you get when you put those other 4 things together for a child. So one goal in comprehension, what does that mean? It's not going to be really that valuable to your child. It needs to be more specific. Okay, so we're going to have this IEP Parent Advocacy Series, Confidence Catalyst. I'm going to give you IEP Rights cheat sheet, and I'm going to give you an IEP Mastery printable planner to help you get organized, because we'll talk about that as a part of this 6-week course. And I'm going to give you an IEP Monthly Mastery printable planner. You'll have templates for pre-meetings, mid-meetings, follow-up meetings, anything you want to track your goals, outcomes, next steps. You want to have every detail in a very organized way, so that if you have to challenge them, you'll have your ducks in a row. Because if you don't have the information and it's not organized, then really nobody's going to listen to you. So remember, anything said can be forgotten, but anything written will be there forever. So be sure you remember that. I wanted to let you know that I wanted to also offer you a time that we could take that IEP audit worksheet that you're going to get, and then I could have a 45-minute one-on-one Zoom meeting with you to help you review each part of your child's IEP. This would be in addition to those weekly group calls that we'll have during the camp. And then I will also make sure that it's very specific, it's very individualized to what your child needs. So I'm happy to do that and excited because it allowed me to get to know you better too. Okay, so these are the values, just to let you know: the 497, the 197, the 147, and then the bonus 347. So the total value, if I was full retail, would be 1362, but because we're doing this online, so I'm offering an 80% discount, and that can be available in 2 monthly payments of $98.50. I'd love to get to know you better. I'd love to help you more one-on-one with your child, and just really help to strengthen your resolve to be sure your child gets the best services. So we'll again start July 7th will be the first week, but you'd be able to review that video anytime. And then we'll set up a time that we'll try to figure out the best time that's most convenient for the people attending to have our weekly Q&A. And then you also get the bonuses, downloads. And if you're interested in that, all you have to do is click on link that is there. And I wanted to add to chat this link as well. So hopefully you can copy this link and you'll get to what you need. When you click on it, you'll see that you have the 2 options. You have the 6-week series with the one-to-one strategy session, and then you have the 6-week series for 97. So 197 and 97. I hope this was helpful. Thank you for attending. You can always reach out to me with your questions, and I hope, I hope you're interested in joining the program. Take care. Thank you.